Welcome to Meeple, uniting players around the world. A 30-minute exploration of PJ and Gareth's board game experiences from across both sides of the Atlantic. Each episode, they share their thoughts and opinions on the world of board games, including their favourite themes, games, hot topics, and much, much more.
Hey guys, and welcome to episode 76, Apistocracy. We're talking with Heather Dixon, who is the designer of the upcoming game Apistocracy. As always, I'm PJ. Unfortunately, Gareth's schedule once again has kept taking him away from us, and he does extend his apologies and his love to you all. So thanks again for listening, guys. And again, with me today is Heather Dixon. Heather, how are you?
I am good. How are you?
Good, man. I just saw you just like a week ago, right? So we were both in England for Cajun Con last week.
Yes,
which
and it was so much fun. I'm so glad I got to go.
I was really tickled. Thank you for coming. It was nice to have fellow Americans. It just I don't know if you felt this way, but as a visitor to their country, it just, I don't know, it was kind of like a security blanket. Like, I was like,
yeah.
There's
a familiar face, right?
Right. Right.
So it's all good. Yeah, no,
Yep.
It was a lot of fun, and they were so welcoming. And my husband had a great time. I, drug him along, but he had as much fun as I did. So
Yep.
It was really good.
So again, thanks for coming with us to Cajun Con, and I think you got to introduce several people to your upcoming game, Apistocracy.
Yes.
So tell us, you're launching Kickstarter when?
Exactly 1 week from when this releases. So Tuesday, April 23rd, at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, I will be launching Apistocracy on Kickstarter.
Awesome. That is awesome. So it's set in London, 1851, which is kind of the heart of Victorian England, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I love that period. I love all the English periods with regards to, going way far back. But I like the Victorian period in particular, in 1851 in particular, because I knew I wanted to do a game where you're using titled individuals to kind of introduce you, and you have to make connections in order to kind of rise up and become the season's favorite. So I can do my whole spiel and tell you about the game so people know what I'm talking about. But I felt like Victorian time was really good, like even better than Regency, because there was so much industry happening and people were starting to rise up on merits outside of just birth. They were, because of investing and the railways and so forth. So I felt like there was more opportunity there with the game to kind of introduce that concept.
So just in case any of our American listeners haven't watched Bridgerton, and don't understand, when you talk about seasons, describe that in give us a little context on how the seasons, what did that mean for the English
season? The season, there was a social season that happened in London, and it kind of moved around because it had to do when the Lords and Commons was sitting, when they had to go to London from their country estates and sit and vote and do all that sort of thing in the springtime. And Queen Victoria is actually the one that kind of determined each year when that was going to be, but it just usually was in the spring. They liked to be done before it got super hot in the summer so they could go back to their estates because it was much more pleasant out there. But so the social season, when everyone had to come, they brought their whole families. And so the wives wanted to socialize, and there were all sorts of teas and races and balls and events that this is obviously not everybody. This is the ton, or the bon ton, which was kind of like our upper crust A-lister kind of people. That would be the kind of subset we're talking about in that period of time.
Right.
A very small percentage, but they were titled generally, and they were able to take part in the events of the season.
So the main kind of objective for a ruling family or a noble family coming to London, right, is to find an appropriate husband or wife for their children, right?
That oftentimes was, but I didn't want to really focus on that.
Hmm.
Um, so in 1851 London, that's when my game is set.
Right.
Basically, you're coming to town at the behest of your titled host. They're launching you into the events of the season, using their influence to launch you so that you can attend all the events and try to get more influence and become the season's favorite. So we don't have like marriage as a win condition in this game. We're just
Right.
going to parties, having fun, and trying to be named like the belle of the ball, the season's favorite, and that sort of thing. So,
So when you play in the game, right,
mhm.
you take on the role of someone who's been invited by a family, or are you a child in one of the families that are
You're
going to London?
invited. You're
Okay.
invited to town. You're at the age where you would become having your coming out and going to
Mhm.
London for the first time and attending all the events. And so you're invited by a titled host. They're the ones that are getting you access to all the events of the season. And you're going to try to make connections and meet as many people with as high titles as you can and do all sorts of things like um, collect art. You get silhouette miniatures portraits. You go to tea rooms and you collect secrets. You go to the ballroom and you make those connections. You go to the parlor where you're actually using a starting hand that you're using for influence. You're curating that because at the end of the season, after that fourth week, we meet in the parlor for a trick taking game of whist.
Yeah. So that's one of the unique things about now, I guess for our listeners. So I play tested this several times. You and I go back. I had to look at my notes, and I
Yeah.
still have my notes from the first time I play tested this. It was August 4th of 2022 at
Yes.
Gen Con.
Yeah.
And it was it has hit so many iterations
Yeah.
of the game. But it's like this worker placement. It's quintessential worker placement, but you somehow managed to incorporate the trick taking whist game, which for those who played Obsession, because I have to somehow mention Obsession in every episode. So in Obsession, one of the activities you host on your tiles is a game of whist. But what I really enjoyed about this game is you actually kind of play whist, which I had never played before. So how much research did you do on that particular card game going into
Well,
this?
I can say that it's really just loosely based on whist because
Okay.
whist has very like so many variations, which are super interesting and fun. I love trick taking games, which is why I wanted to incorporate that because I also like worker placement, and that's why I wanted to kind of bring the two together. But I basically boiled it down to a real basic trick taking game, just because a lot of people aren't familiar with them, or so it's something that they
Right.
can kind of introduce them to the concept. But I have done a lot of research, and I'm actually putting together a booklet of whist in its various forms, as well as some other Victorian parlor games that I'm going to have a booklet for one of the pledge levels or
Um,
an accessory, so to speak. But
so yeah, I was going to ask you about that. In the project for the Kickstarter, is there
yeah,
going to be either as a stretch goal or maybe as a later game in a couple of years, like just an Apistocracy take on whist as a game by itself? Are you
yeah,
thinking about doing that as an add-on? Are you thinking about doing that as a stretch goal?
yeah.
Um, yeah. What do you
It's
think
an
about?
actually I do have that in we have something called the Whist Apistocracy Whist box, which includes all of the cards you would need. So I have cards that look like normal cards. I'll tell everyone one of the things that's unique about our deck. There's no king because Queen Victoria is on the throne. So
Right.
Queen is our high, and we have Prince, Jack, 10, 9, 8, and so forth. And also, we are playing with aces low in my particular deck.
Mm, okay.
But that's because Queen Victoria is the queen bee. She's at the top of the social beehive and apistocracy. So I am putting together a whist box that has that booklet with various variations of whist as well as other Victorian parlor games. In addition, there'll be some like foil artist playing cards, like two decks, because you often need two decks to play. And there'll
Right.
be decks you can play with like any game with. I mean, poker, whist, whatever, bridge. But they will have that queen as the highest
Has a high
favorite.
card.
as a
Yeah.
highest price card in it. So
So I think in doing my research for the trip to our trip to England last 2 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, did did so Albert, Victoria's husband, did he die in 1850 or 60? Do you
he no, he
recall?
was it was closer to 60. It was the
60.
late 50s.
So presumably in the time of Apistocracy, he's still alive, but
Yeah.
definitely after he dies. Granted, she was the
Yeah.
queen, I get that, but like because she mourned for 35 years or something. It
Yes.
was really, really fascinating. One facet of the game that I think would be interesting to our listeners, it was interesting to me too, um, is the miniatures.
Yes. The
They're not
brooches.
yeah, yeah, they're no, like one of the things you do, it's like a set collection where you get miniatures, isn't it something
Oh,
like
you're
that?
talking about the yeah, the
The
gallery.
art, yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? Because I noticed in some of the museums in London that
Mhm.
that was a thing.
Yeah, I took lots of pictures. So, because I did go to the museums as well. Um, so we are commissioning art in the gallery. You start with a silhouette, which would have been the most attainable forms of kind of capturing someone's likeness at the time. As a matter of fact, it was usually cut from paper when you're doing a silhouette.
Mm,
Um, and uh, oftentimes they would, young ladies and sometimes even young gentlemen would learn to do them themselves and do them at home. So they were the most accessible version for available to the most people. After that, we have the miniatures, which is going to be often on a ceramic that's painted and it's small and it's something that you usually can carry about in your pocket or maybe wear in a locket or have it sitting very small on a desk. So they're also less expensive and they were a little more attainable, but they certainly weren't available to everybody. So the miniature, and then what you probably saw also, because I saw them a lot, were cameos, which are
yes.
brooches, which are players' pieces that are going up the beehive. Each player has one. The bee brooches, that is the reference to cameos. So
Okay.
they're actually,
So you mentioned Beehive. This is a great segue. There's this really cool, it's very unique. I don't think I've seen it in any other board game. Is this beehive, this giant beehive, which if anyone looks at pictures of Apistocracy as people are playtesting it, that's what they're seeing. Can you tell us about like the inspiration behind the beehive? What is the beehive? And then how does it work in the game?
okay. So it actually is what first got me thinking about the theme for this game initially. Um, there was a lithograph or an etching that was in a lot of publications in the mid 1800s. And actually, there was one gentleman I think that kind of did it first, but then all the other, papers piled on and did their version of it. But it was George Cruikshank, and he was the uh, illustrator that did it. And it basically had a beehive with Queen Victoria at the top. And then it had the various titles of their society from um, Duke underneath, Duke and Duchess would be underneath the Queen, then all the way down to Baron. And then it went all the way down, like through society with the various rankings, all the way to like the chimney sweeps. So it was way more levels than I have on my beehive. Because my beehive, we're just going to events and we're in the tons. So we're trying to get to Queen Victoria's ball. She would have a fancy dress ball, her and Albert, every year. They would host kind of at the end of the season. So, and she went all out in costume as well. Um, so, yeah, so that's where I got inspired. I was like, I want to be up at the top there trying to climb my way up to the ball. And that's where the first idea came about. But then obviously I knew that whist was such a huge part of their culture and it was trick taking and it would
Right.
also offer me that opportunity to incorporate two things I really like, which are worker placement and trick taking games. So
You did that lovely. I
yeah.
I was I was really impressed because the first time I played test, I was like, "Wait, I gotta do what?" Like I understand trick taking, but I
Yeah.
I had a really hard time. And then I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is just an elegant blend of worker placement and trick taking in a way I've not seen before." So
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to that. That's pretty cool. So I'm reading about I'm listening to you talk and I'm looking at Crookshank. So apparently
Mhm.
he illustrated some of Charles Dickens' novels.
I did not know
No,
that.
that's cool, right?
That is
Ah,
very cool. Yeah.
Because we went to the Charles Dickens Museum when we were in London, because I'm a fan of Charles Dickens, and didn't didn't see any mention of that. But
Yeah,
yeah, so that's cool.
I love that.
I noticed there were miniatures in the Queen's Gallery near
Mhm.
Buckingham. Did you make it to the Queen's Gallery?
I didn't. I went to
You
the
didn't.
Victoria and Albert Museum.
Oh, you did. So
Yeah. Yeah,
we'll
I
we'll
kinda
tell
had
us
to.
about that a little bit.
Well, okay, so in 1851, which is the year of my game,
Hmm.
there was the Grand Exhibition of the Crystal Palace. It was this huge event that kind of became later kind of, I suspect, what we would equate it to would be a World's Fair.
Hmm.
First thing of its kind. It's England, and it's all of the countries associated with England. And they had all sorts of items on display in this giant crystal palace that was basically this glass structure that was enormous. And it was all Albert's doing. It was his
Mm.
idea. He wanted England to show off all of the things that they had and all of the areas that they were advancing and that sort of thing. So it was a very huge event. And some of those things I mean, they had a lot of things in their collections. So now there's a Victoria and Albert Museum, which there's other things in there as well.
Sure.
However, there's a lot of the things that were on display in 1851 at the Crystal Palace.
Right.
So I thought that was pretty cool because total tie
How
into my game.
right. No, how much so you're at the Victoria Albert Museum. How many elements of apostocracy did you see? Whether intentionally or unintentionally. You're at the museum, you're like,
A
"That's in
lot.
my game, and that's in my
Yeah.
game."
I will say I sought out that time period because they have it all kind of according to time periods. And I did go visit more, but I went directly to Queen Victoria's, reign basically and
Right.
started there. They had like a architectural kind of model of the Crystal Palace. They had a painting that I had seen, in my research in books and online that is of the family when they opened the event inside the Crystal Palace, and there's all of the like ton members essentially surrounding them, and it was painted to commemorate the time. And it was this big, large painting, and it was sitting right there, and so it was really cool to get to see that as well. And but I love that period. I love all of the history
Right.
in the Victoria Albert Museum. It was really cool. So I kept going and I went through all the decades and checked it out. Also, of course, went to the British Museum too.
Of course.
It had more of the older things, but
Right.
and
Right.
I'd been there before, but it's always a good place to go. It's wonderful.
Absolutely. So you've mentioned it a couple times. I remember it in the game, but just in case anyone's curious. So the ton, is that
Yes,
how
the
it's
ton.
pronounced?
The
So what is the ton and how does it fit into the game?
So the bon ton, which is a French word for like the most elegant, highest titled, and most elite sort of people. That's where the term comes from in society. And that is the people that you are meeting in the game and trying to become friends with. So it's titled
Right.
individuals and or maybe wealthy landowners and that sort of thing too. But it's basically where your playground is in that beehive. You're going to all the events they're going to. You're going to the races at Ascot. You're going to balloon launch at Vauxhall Garden, and you're going to the Marchioness's dinner and the salons and teas. So that is the space the game kind of takes place in.
And there's kind of there's almost a kind of a hand management aspect to
Yeah.
the game because you're building your hand, right, in
Yes.
preparation for the final. But there's
Totally.
are there still multiple trick taking phases, or is it just
No, it's
okay?
one.
See, because I'm
Yeah.
not seeing the most current
You've
rendition.
done a few iterations, but not one real recently. So no, it's
So
a
disregard everything I just said, guys, and listen to Heather now.
well, it gives you more opportunity to build that handout. And
Okay.
so in the game, during the you start with the starting hand. You have a low card or a low number of each suit.
Hmm.
So club, spade, diamond, heart. And those represent titles. So there's a hierarchy to them. So hearts are our highest. They're the Duke or Duchess, as close as you get to royalty before you
Mhm.
are in fact royalty. And the lowest is a club. That's our Baron or Baroness. And so you can always use a higher title if you know someone, there are people that are opening doors for you, essentially. And so if something requires a heart or a Duke or Duchess to open the door, that's the only suit you can play, or you basically discard from your hand in order to do the um, event. But if it's, for instance, a club, you can use club, spade, diamond, or heart because they're all higher than the baron or baroness. So they can open those doors just as easily. So you're trying to make
Okay.
connections with the higher ones, or, the ones that are ranked heart or diamond being the higher ones, followed by spade and club. However, in the final trick taking game, we have a trump suit that is diamonds, because you were diamond of the first water was a term they used for kind of
Okay.
like the ball.
Yeah.
So kind of where it came from. So when you have an opportunity to go to the parlor during the weeks, you're going to be curating your hand and getting better cards for both influencing game and also for that final trick taking game, and also shedding some of those early low cards that you don't want
Right.
anymore. But sometimes you have to make a choice because Queen Victoria's our highest, and the queens are off on their own. But then in the parlor, you have the princes, the jacks, the tens, and then all the diamonds that are not already in someone's starting hand. So they're all the better cards, and you can visit there and gain one. And also at that time, you can trash one of your other cards. But sometimes you have to make a choice because it might be a seven of diamonds sitting there, and then there might be, a prince of clubs, which is high from a trick taking thing, but not for that influencing game. And then you might have like a heart that's a jack, right?
Right.
So you're
Right.
like, do I need that heart right now because I really need to open these doors? Or do I just want to go deep in diamonds because
Hmm.
that's going to serve me the best? Because at the end of the game, depending on player count, there's anywhere from 7 to 9 tricks, and each trick is worth 2 victory points. So there's
What's the player count for the game?
1 to 4.
1 to 4. Okay.
Yeah, we're working on the solo
S-
version.
So what about if we've got gamers who are either they don't they don't like trick taking or they're not comfortable with trick taking? Is it possible to play the game enough and accumulate enough points
Yeah,
that that the whist it can mitigate a poor performance in the trick taking whist at
yeah,
the end? Yeah.
it is. You don't, I mean, and chances are you have, sometimes people take no tricks, but even if you're not terribly prepared and you maybe just go get 1 or 2 cards, sometimes you can at least gain it 1 trick.
Hmm. Right.
And if there's 4 players, even if you're not getting a lot, they probably are dividing up those tricks between
Right.
themselves. So the number of points they're getting isn't, you know, so much higher.
Okay.
However, you can be doing a lot of things instead of going to the parlor, that will gain you Victoria points during the game.
Right.
So, and I do call them Victoria points, not victory points. But
Victoria points. I love
yeah,
that. That's so thematic. It's great. So I guess the other question is the opposite true? If for whatever reason, um, my strategy or execution in worker placement, it just doesn't go my way, can I make up for lost ground by winning more tricks at the
yeah,
end?
you
Yeah.
can. You have to do more than one thing. That
Right.
one thing sometimes will include going, moderately or pretty heavy into the parlor to get a better hand, but you're going to be doing other things too during the season. So you can't do everything. There's too much going on. So you kind of have to choose which ones are most attainable to you. And also each of the characters, they have a host that's giving them an asymmetric bonus or
Oh.
starting place. So that actually helps them and helps a new player kind of know when there's so much in front of them, kind of
Mhm.
have an idea of maybe what they might go try first.
Okay.
But I am
And
doing, yeah.
so I remember early on prototype testing, you actually had real brooches for the
Yes,
player
I
pieces.
know.
It
Mhm.
looks like you now have some sort of a you're still using brooches, right? But they're
They're yeah, they're
brooch like?
brooch-like. They don't actually attach to you, although that would be really
Right.
cool.
Right.
And they are plastic. But I did have some miniatures made too. And this is what I did some miniatures and to kind of see what those molds would look like when I
Mhm.
did the resin for the game. And I got them back. And of course, they're gray. You know, they're not painted.
Sure.
They're
Sure.
colorful. Like those aren't the ones I have in my prototype right now. But I decided I want this to look special. I'd never miniature painted before, but I am an artist. So I painted a lot. But I was like, I wonder if I could gold leaf these miniature brooches. And I did. And it worked. So
Hey.
yeah. So I did like a little color on them and then I did a gold leaf and it was really fun. But it's just for fun. But anyway, so now people that do like miniature painting, you can gold leaf, silver leaf, copper leaf, or whatever kind of leaf you want to onto those minis if you really want a metallic effect. It's pretty
Right.
cool. But
So
that was just me playing around.
so last week, when Gareth and I recorded together, that was crazy.
Yeah.
If y'all haven't, go back and listen to episode
Yeah.
75. Gareth and I were in the same room. It was just, sitting at a table chatting. We talked about doing, I think you heard it because I think you sent me a message, but we were like, we wanted to envision, or it's my idea is to envision some sort of a trilogy, either
Mm-hmm.
the Regency and then Apistocracy, which is Victorian age, and then Obsession, or start with Apistocracy, go with Obsession, and then a third game that kind
That's
of
a little
early,
later.
and that would just be a really cool thematic day of playing.
Yes.
My wife had suggested marrying Mr. Darcy because that is
Yes.
Regency.
Regency.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's Jane Austen's not my favorite, but
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, I just think it's really cool because I think your game is a beautiful complement to Obsession, and I think they both would play really well together.
Yeah.
One before the other.
Sure.
Be-
They're really different, but
yeah,
they obviously the thematically, and also you're dealing with the ton, obviously. I mean,
right.
and you're trying to make your way in that and make a name for yourself. So they're very much similar in that way too.
And
So even though it's
it's
later Victorian, yeah.
right, and it's also it's a different role, right? Because in
Right.
Apistocracy, you're being invited by a noble family to come to the season,
Yeah.
whereas in Obsession, you are a noble family trying to manage your estate and
Yes.
host all these things. So I could
Yes.
envision playing Apistocracy, and then in Obsession we have like casual guests and prestigious
Yeah.
guests. Your character from Obsession,
Sure.
from Apistocracy, could be a casual guest
Yeah.
card. Like, yeah.
I
So
like it. I thought
Dan,
it
if you're listening, you need to get with
yeah.
Heather and work out some sort of a,
I
I don't
just thought
know.
of I thought of the trilogy too. Okay, so you start in Apistocracy because you're just making your come out.
Mhm.
You're not getting married. You're just going to the parties and trying
Right?
to become the season's favorite. Then you go off to the estate where people do get married and
Yep.
maybe and that sort of thing. And then the final game, because I don't know, I know it's Victorian, so we could just say it's later Victorian.
Sure.
But Deadly Dowagers. So you're married and now you want to kill your
Oh,
husband off, so
yes.
you can like marry up to the next title. So
That's
there's
true
the
because you're
three.
trying to marry the prince, right? At the
Yeah,
end that's the whole point of Deadly Dowager. Oh, that's a good,
there's
yeah.
thematically it just works.
No, I think that's great. So we
Yeah.
need to get Apistocracy it at your tables. You need to go to Kickstarter, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, April 23rd. That is a week from today when you're listening to the episode, if you're listening to it live. And then you can have the Victorian era trilogy of games on your table. Yeah, there you go. How about that? That's cool. Is there anything else you want to mention, Heather, about the game, about the design or the artwork? Who did the art for the
I'm
game?
I'm the artist
You are.
and the designer.
What?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Wow.
I am an artist and art director by trade. I said I was a game designer by hobby, but now I am a game designer in truth as well. And so basically, it's part of my process. I draw constantly. So if I reiterate and I need some more characters or components or cards, I just draw more. I have so many versions, and I at some point I need to post on social media my like early versions because it's funny to see them now compared. Like it was kind of a rougher sketch kind of a thing, and I need to put the like early versus the now kind of pictures up there. But yeah, so I did the art, and
Wow.
that's what I love doing. So
How did I not know that? Did I not know? Did I
I
know
don't
that and I
know.
forgot? Oh my
Maybe.
gosh. Well, if I knew it and I forgot, I apologize. Otherwise, that's amazing because the artwork is fantastic. And I think we'll leave it there. I think that's good unless there's any
Um,
so go ahead.
I'll just mention that I'm not the best with all social media, but I am on Instagram. And it is
Yes.
at Apistocracy. And Apistocracy is essentially aristocracy, but a P instead of an
Mm-hmm.
R, because we're climbing
Mm-hmm.
the social beehive. So yeah, at Apistocracy is me. If you want to check out some of that art and some of the travels and that sort of thing there, and also the journey I've made from those early iterations
Yes.
and meeting you all the way to where we are
Yes.
today. So
Absolutely. And I guess to say the motto is to keep your temper.
yes, that was something you would see on a whist token. With whist tokens were very prevalent at the time, and they were used in playing the game whist, and Queen Victoria's likeness would be on it, and it said keep your temper, which is funny because she notoriously kind of had a temper.
She did.
So yeah.
She did. And for those of you listening, I am wearing a t-shirt that Heather made and gave one to myself and my wife, and it says keep your temper. And so I wore it today for this very purpose. So
Yeah.
remember to keep your temper. With that, I would say thank you for listening. Again, Gareth, you'll be back next week, presumably, where we will be episode 77. We've got some more designers coming up, a couple of games that Gareth and I are play testing right now. So, Heather, thank you for joining us. Thanks for your patience with me today.
Oh, no, it was wonderful. Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Please subscribe. And as always, we love to hear your thoughts and ideas. So make sure to leave those in the comments. And don't forget, you can also chat with us both on Instagram at Meeple to Meeple.